Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's episode of Kibbitzing with Kagan. I'm delighted today to be chatting with Allison Stearns, the longtime CEO of CaringMatters, formerly known as Hospice Caring. Thank you, Allison, for taking the time from your important work to join me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. So let's start with telling folks what CaringMatters is and why you changed your name. Maybe they were used to the name Hospice Caring. Why don't you just give us an idea of that journey?
Sure. So CaringMatters is a 32-year-old community-based nonprofit organization serving all of Montgomery County. And we were founded as what's called a non-medical volunteer hospice. So we have a number of different support services for people with life-limiting illness and people who are grieving. Over the course of the years, hospice became better known as a medical entity where people would go for end-of-life care, and an organization that's typically funded by Medicare and where people get their pain management and their medical equipment and some of the more medical aspects of end of life. So it became a little bit confusing for people that would hear the name Hospice Caring and assume that we were a full service hospice. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we provide a different set of support services for kind of an overlapping population. So as our bereavement support services grew and our services moved in kind of new directions, still serving patients with serious illness and people who are grieving, we decided to change our name to something that would more accurately reflect the work we're doing now.
That's great. So do you collaborate or cross-refer with Montgomery Hospice?
We do. We often will receive referrals from medical hospices, especially if a patient either needs more intense support services beyond what maybe one volunteer could help with one day a week. And then most of the medical hospices do have their own teams of volunteers, and we do too. But if a patient gets closed from hospice because in the best case scenario, they stabilize and they no longer qualify for hospice, but they still want to have companionship or somebody to help with some transportation or just a friendly visitor or some respite, then they'll often call us. And we often get patients before they're in medical hospice. And when we're working with them, if their health declines and they become hospice eligible and decide to pursue hospice, often we'll continue working with them as they go through the journey of having hospice services too.
So Allison, let's not even assume that everybody knows what hospice is. Is there a definition, and is there a period of time when someone is eligible for your services?
So for our services, the answer is generally no. We do work with patients with serious illness, many of whom might become terminal, and we usually work with patients who end up being about maybe 18 months to 2 years before end of life. But of course, none of us has a crystal ball, and we can't necessarily predict that that's where somebody is in their journey with their illness.
Yeah.
But we do work with patients who are actively declining and have very serious debilitating illnesses where they really do have a need for that extra set of hands.
That's great. So you have more than 200 volunteers that work with you, and you gave some of the examples. How and why do you recruit volunteers, and what sort of other tasks might someone do?
Sure. So we deliver all of our direct service programs utilizing trained volunteers. We're fairly unique in that way. Our trained volunteers are really well trained, and I consider to be really high level and empowered to really be an important part of the CaringMatters workforce.
Sure.
We utilize volunteers not only to visit patients like what I just described, and what I didn't make really clear is that since we don't do any of the medical services, our volunteers are what people would think of as hospice volunteers. Our volunteers go into the homes of patients with serious illness and provide companionship, respite, light house cleaning, sometimes making meals, sometimes playing games or keeping them company, whatever they need. And many of our volunteers are also open to providing transportation for patients to medical appointments or otherwise. In addition to that, our even larger programs at this point in Caring Matters are our bereavement support services. So we have a variety of children's bereavement support
I
services.
was just going to ask, talk about the Good Grief Club, please.
Yes, so our Good Grief Club is a 7-week support group for children who are grieving the death of a loved one. And it is offered throughout Montgomery County Public Schools and beyond. We have partnered with independent schools. We've partnered with community-based organizations, mental health organizations, linkages to learning, other types of programs where they're identifying grieving children, and it doesn't have to be a specific relationship. We often get referrals of children who have lost a parent or a sibling, or maybe a close grandparent who's living in the home with them. People who are really grieving.
But not a pet. The puppy died. That's not what you do.
So we do not do pet grief. We certainly, especially with children, a lot of times pets will be a first loss for a child, and we certainly acknowledge that, and it comes up sometimes in educational programs. But bereavement really is grief by loss of a loved one, and in this case, a person.
Yes. So let's talk about the training. So someone wants to volunteer. They get in touch with Caring Matters. What are they in for? How long a process before they can be helping people?
So for our program training, it starts out with a 3-day general hospice training. And it is in the middle of the week. We have many volunteers who do work, many full-time, but we feel that this is a really important part of engaging with Caring Matters and demonstrating the commitment. So it does involve the 3 full days. It's a real treat for people. People come to our training thinking it's going to be long and drawn out and quite frankly boring, and it ends up flying by, and it's very interactive and experiential and focused on personal reflections about our personal experiences with loss and grief, and it's a bonding experience, and it really helps us understand kind of at a deeper, heartfelt level what our clients are going through. So it starts out with the first 3-day training. At the end of the 3-day training, when people know what all of our different opportunities are for continued volunteering, then they are sort of triaged to a different program director. And depending on what they're interested in, there's subsequent training. So it would be another day or two, whether it's for caregiving or for children's bereavement, running support groups, adult bereavement support groups, Camp Aaron. We have a wide variety of opportunities all within that space.
So talk about how your services were affected by the coronavirus.
It was huge, as many organizations I know are going through. But one thing that I think is really unique is that Caring Matters' entire philosophy and our entire mission and model is around the gift of presence and community and reducing
presence, CE, not TS, right?
Present, correct.
Okay.
Yes,
both are nice, but
thank you for clarifying. Yes. And so it was a real challenge, and I have to say, thanks to technology and the commitment of really creative staff and volunteers and a supportive board, we came through it beautifully, and we were able to pivot our services and find creative ways to support people. So we, needless to say, for many months, we were not able to have our volunteers go into homes to be physically, putting themselves or their patients at risk. But we used Zoom and telephone and FaceTime and sending cards and, helping people by doing contactless errands, picking up food and
Nice.
delivering birthday presents or a birthday dinner, or, you know, helping people all different ways. We stay
Lovely.
really engaged. And
So
our support groups all were on Zoom. So
we're taping this in mid-July. Have you reestablished all your programs, or are there still limitations on what you're doing?
we are reestablishing all of our programs. We are in the process. We are now going back into homes with fully vaccinated volunteers
Yay.
who are, of course, comfortable doing that. There are some
Mm-hmm.
people who still are not comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
but for the people who voluntarily are interested, there's some people that just miss this work so much and miss their clients and feel terrible that they've, you know, they feel like they've abandoned their clients for all these months. And so they are just waiting to get back into the homes and help patients. So we're busy. We're getting a lot of calls and a lot of referrals, and we're in the process of matching volunteers. Our adult bereavement support groups are stronger than ever. We're doing them all on Zoom right now, and we're serving twice as many people as we ever served in person.
Wow. Wow.
We will.
So I have a million more questions.
I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's okay. So you have the Cottage in Gaithersburg on the grounds of Gaithersburg High School in Boar Park. Is there a reason that anybody would come to the Cottage? What community services are available there? Can you talk about that?
So prior to COVID, we offered many or most really of our adult bereavement support groups at the Cottage. The Cottage is a beautiful space, and we are so grateful to the city of Gaithersburg for the ability to use that space. We use it for it's our hub, it's our home base, it's our community. And it's where we do our volunteer training. It's where we have our administrative offices. It's where we do adult bereavement support groups, occasionally a volunteer appreciation event, a fundraiser, a board meeting. You know, we use it for anything, anytime we need to bring groups of people together. But we don't do too many of our programs at the Cottage. Really, our adult bereavement. Oh, we do family nights at the Cottage. A family night is another program that we've started over the last few years, where we bring grieving families together, parents and children together, and we have multi-families. You know, 6 to 8 families come together and do an expressive arts project where they can remember their loved one and talk about that person's legacy and share their stories and learn that they're not alone in their experience. And parents can meet parents and children can meet children who are grieving, and that we do at the Cottage too.
Okay, just your describing that gets me teary. How do you stay stable and upbeat, and your staff and your volunteers, in the midst of facing, I mean, I always say that we're all dying a little closer to death every day. And the question is when we die, how we die, and whether we're ready for it. So, I mean, this is not something that can be avoided, but being in the midst of it, how do you stay so upbeat and positive?
I think Caring Matters. When I first started working at Caring Matters, somebody said to me, "This is the happiest place you'll ever work."
Amazing.
And I actually have really grown to agree with that. We hear very sad stories, but we have each other, and our volunteers are really the ones who are, you know, out there with the patients, living these sad situations, and they will say that it's more gratifying and rewarding to them than it is to the patient, even though the patient might not agree.
Amazing.
But I think having the opportunity and the gift of being part of somebody's journey and helping to lift them up is really amazing. And in our bereavement programs, it's a very sad circumstance that brings people into those groups, but people find the groups to be so uplifting and oftentimes life-saving. So I think the rewards, you know, sort of overshadow the sadness. And I think we all, and the organization attracts the most incredible, compassionate, special people that we all feel surrounded by love and caring and nurturing. And so nobody feels that we're in this alone. And it keeps us all really happy and really proud and grateful.
That's great. Talk about, I'm looking, I have such a long list. Talk about, as people prepare for death, as your clients, what do they Do you talk to them about having a will, having a living will? Does death with dignity, compassionate choice, end of life option, does that come up? Do you all have a position on that from an advocacy perspective?
We do not have a position from an advocacy perspective. We're really a service organization.
Yep.
We really try to remain neutral and not, and respectful. We always talk about how it's the patient's journey and we're on their train with them and they're the driver of the train. So we don't take strong advocacy positions, but we certainly are supportive and try to be helpful in allowing patients to talk about what's on their mind and to giving them information that might be helpful for them to explore and raise their awareness.
And what about a will or living will?
So we don't do those things, but we encourage, we do help them. We may ask if they have an advance directive.
Yes.
And certainly help them find the resources and the forms to complete if they choose to complete it. We don't actively require it or do it for them.
Sure.
But we make them aware of it. We talk to them about, we're aware of some of the tools, the 5 wishes that, we've all been trained in advanced care planning. We train our volunteers, but we don't, we really allow the patient to tell us what they need from us.
Talk about the 5 wishes, if you can remember all 5.
Oh my gosh, I am not going to be able to talk specifically to all 5.
Give a concept, if you would.
The 5 wishes is a document for advanced care planning that we encourage people to read, that just has some good food for thought and some good information about the kinds of things to think about when you're doing your end of life planning. So people have to think about, under various circumstances, who would I want to speak for me if I'm not able to speak for myself? And have I had conversations with that person so they know my values and they know what keeps me, motivated to keep going if I'm in a really serious, life-threatening medical crisis where hard decisions have to be made around aggressive medical interventions. What would I want? What wouldn't I want? At a certain point, how is it important for me to live, and what are the kinds of things that are important to me? And to really think that through those things, to identify a healthcare power of attorney, to write down my values, those kinds of things.
If from your years, what have you heard that are people's biggest regrets? I'm facing death in X period of time. I only wish I had.
I don't know that I'm properly fully equipped to, I don't know that it would be fair and authentic for me to try to answer that, because we hear so many things and it's such a personal kind of situation. It's like any relationship. It's kind of like saying that you're an expert on marriage because of your own marriage, or so I don't know that I can really answer that. I do know that one big thing though is that people often say universally that they should have brought hospice in sooner. We do hear that a lot. There is a lot of stigma and fear around hospice and the word hospice, and I'm not even referring to CaringMatters services. I'm also referring to the Medicare certified hospices, because in Medicare certified hospice, a doctor has to say that a patient has 6 months or less. And they don't necessarily have to end up having 6 months or less, but there has to be a good, honest possibility that it'll be 6 months or less. And patients do have to give up their curative treatment. And a lot of people are so afraid of hearing that they postpone getting the hospice support. And then when they do, there's such a relief to them and their family, and they can live more comfortably and with much more support than they've had. And many people, it's very common for the family members to say, I only wish we had called them sooner.
Yeah, wow.
That's really common.
So I have a few quick questions before we go to the Fast 5. First off, you're located in Gaithersburg, but just want to be clear, you serve anyone anywhere around Montgomery County.
Correct, we do. We do.
Okay.
We serve all of Montgomery County, and we go to patients' homes, and we have groups in different places, and our school-based groups are all over the county. Yes.
Okay. Second, do you have non-native English speaking? Do you have bilingual volunteers? And what do you do when a patient is not English proficient?
So we do have a full-time, we have several staff members who speak fluent Spanish, and including, somebody who's at the office almost full-time. And we, all of our materials are also available in Spanish. We have many volunteers who speak additional languages besides English or Spanish, and we will always do our very, very best to bring in an interpreter or do whatever we need to do to accommodate people from various cultures and languages and abilities.
And are there any faiths, any religious practices that you do or don't serve?
We serve everybody. We serve everybody. We serve people of all faiths and no faith.
Okay, I knew the answer to that one. I just want to get that on the record here. So before we go to Fast Five, if somebody wants to volunteer or donate, where can they go?
CaringMatters.org.
Okay.
That is our website. Everything's on our website. We are fully dependent on philanthropy and volunteers. I mean, that is how we do what we do. And I may not have mentioned that all of our services are free of charge. So we don't generate revenue from our programs. We just are able to do it by all of the people in the community coming together and supporting us.
Such a wonderful group. And I should disclose that I'm very happy to be on an honorary board member and to provide a little bit of support for your really important work. So,
and we're so grateful to you to have you on our board of trustees. That means a lot to us. So thank you.
So let's do our Fast Five. Okay, 5 quick questions to help people get to know you better, Allison Stearns. So first, tell us a song that you consider your personal anthem, a song that lifts you up, inspires you when you're down.
Oh my goodness.
It's a hard question.
Oh, a song. I Will Remember You.
Nice.
Reminds me of my best friend who I lost very tragically a couple of years ago. And I think of her with that song, and it lifts me up.
I'm so sorry. What is a hobby that you picked up during COVID?
I try to get outside a lot more often than I used to. I spend more time with my dog and my kids, walking through my neighborhood, appreciating my neighborhood, doing the outside activities that I think many of us have started doing more of, bonfires and barbecues and things like that.
Fantastic. What is your favorite cuisine? Favorite kind of food?
Seafood, I will say.
Good. Can't have too many crabs this year, though. That's a bummer.
I know.
When you're comfortable doing so, if you could travel anywhere in the world or in the country, where would you want to go?
Let's see. I don't know. I do fantasize about a trip to the Greek islands.
Beautiful. That's a good choice. Okay. And the last question, Allison Stearns of Caring Matters. The question that I ask everybody, what is your secret superpower? What is something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
Wow, that's a hard one. I can be really productive really, really late night when a lot of people might be sleeping.
Okay.
I can get a second wind and plow out all kinds of things. So.
Good for you. Well, Allison, thank you for all that you do for the community, leading such an important nonprofit. And I really encourage people to go to caringmatters.org and consider supporting their vital services. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for what you do every day, year round. Stay safe.
Thank
stay
you
well.
so much for this opportunity. Bye.
Absolutely.